Every sand hides a secret, and tonight they all come back.
The chamber that leads nowhere. Dr. Hassan Mahmoud had been exploring the first-rate pyramid of Giza for 23 years when he discovered the passage that seemed on no maps, brought about no acknowledged chamber, and existed in a space that architectural surveys insisted became stable limestone. The doorway manifested at 3:33 a.m. throughout his unauthorized nighttime survey, materializing inside the Grand Gallery's wall like a door opening in reality itself. "Nadia, do you notice this?" he whispered into his radio, now not wanting to wake the security guards he'd bribed for after-hours get-right-of-entry to. His graduate assistant's voice crackled back. "See what? I'm monitoring your video feed. You are just status inside the Grand Gallery staring at a wall." However, Hassan could see it sincerely. A rectangular opening, precisely cut, with hieroglyphs carved round its border. No longer the decorative inscriptions tourists saw at some point of the pyramid, but older symbols, pre-dynastic marks that should not exist in a 4th dynasty structure. And the symbols had been sparkling with faint phosphorescence, pulsing in rhythm with something Hassan should experience but now not pay attention. He approached the hole, his flashlight beam disappearing into darkness that regarded to absorb light rather than reflect it. The air emerging from the passage was cold, a long way less warm than the pyramid's indoors must be, and carried a odor Hassan recognized from his doctorate paintings on mummification, natron and resin, and the sweet Hunwell odor of preserved flesh. "I'm going in," he said, ignoring Nadia's protests. The passage was slim, forcing Hassan to transport sideways, the walls pressing near sufficient to trigger his slight claustrophobia. But it became the geometry that disturbed him maximum. The passage didn't comply with Euclidean principles. Angles met in approaches that should not be feasible. Corners existed where intersections could not. Area folded around itself in configurations that made his eyes pain when he attempted to focus on them. After 50 meters, the passage opened right into a chamber. However, calling it a chamber became inadequate. It became huge, easily 10 times larger than the king's chamber, carved from an unmarried piece of stone that showed no seams, no blocks, no evidence of construction. As if a person had hollowed out an area within the pyramid without disposing of any cloth, creating a void that existed between the physical stones as opposed to within them. And in the middle of the not-possible chamber stood a sarcophagus, no longer like the simple granite container in the king's chamber, however something far extra intricate. Black stone inlaid with gold hieroglyphs, supported via 4 pillars carved from the same fabric, surrounded by canopic jars larger than Hassan himself. "Nadia, are you continue to receiving?" Hassan's voice echoed unusually inside the giant space, as if the chamber changed into each very huge and very small concurrently. Handiest static responded. Anything area he'd entered failed to permit conversation with the out-of-doors international. Hassan approached the sarcophagus cautiously, his archaeological education warring with intuition that screamed to flee. The hieroglyphs weren't preferred funerary texts. They had been warnings, instructions, commands written in grammatical structures that predated recognized Egyptian via millennia. He could read them most effective partly, his thoughts translating fragments. "Do now not open, contains what cannot die, sealed by using covenant of the first builders. To release is to give up." But Hassan had spent 23 years trying to find precisely this, proof that the pyramids contained extra than pharaohs, tombs, that they served functions past what professional Egyptology mentioned. His palms traced the sarcophagus lid, located the seam, started to pry. "Medical Dr. Hassan, in case you're receiving this transmission, do not open the sarcophagus." Hassan spun round. The voice came from anywhere and nowhere, speaking in classical Arabic with an accent he couldn't location. And status at the chamber's part had been figures, translucent, shimmering, carrying the white gowns of historical monks. "Who are you?" Hassan demanded. "We're the Guardians. We've got maintained this seal for 500 years, looking to make certain no person opens what should continue to be closed. You've observed the chamber that turned into supposed to be unfindable, bypassed protections that must have remained impenetrable. But there may be nevertheless time to leave, to forget, to permit the sealed continue to be sealed. What's inside the sarcophagus? The lead guardian moved closer, and Hassan noticed that he wasn't totally translucent. Something solid remained, a center of preserved cognizance wrapped in layers of spectral power. The first pharaoh. No longer Narmer, now not Menes, no longer any of the names your records information. The only who came earlier than, who united the tribes now not through conquest but via containing. He fought the Isfit, the chaos, the unmaking, the thing that existed earlier than truth become ordered. And when he couldn't wreck it, he absorbed it, took it into himself, have become the prison that held it. That is mythology, metaphor. Is it? You are status in a chamber that exists among stones without occupying space, talking to guys who have been useless for millennia, but stay aware through will and duty. How a great deal of what you call mythology is surely reality you lack framework to understand. Hassan looked at the sarcophagus with new understanding and new horror. You're saying there's something alive in there, something that's been conscious for 4,500 years, sealed in the dark. Now not alive, no longer useless, suspended. The primary pharaoh contained the Isfit inside himself, then sealed himself within the sarcophagus so it could not break out. We built the pyramid round him, no longer as tomb but as lock, as weight, as shape designed to preserve chaos in a single small space. Every stone serves a cause, each passage has which means, each measurement is exactly calculated to maintain the containment. And if I open it, the Isfit escapes. The chaos that predates order floods returned into fact, beginning right here, spreading outward, unmaking the whole lot it touches. Egypt first, then the Mediterranean, ultimately the arena. Fact will revert to primordial state, formless, void, without shape or which means. And the primary pharaoh, who's been conserving it lower back for 45 centuries, will ultimately be released to die nicely, which he would possibly welcome after goodbye, but we cannot allow it. Hassan's hand remained on the sarcophagus lid. 23 years of searching, and he'd found something beyond his wildest academic aims. Proof that the pyramids had been greater than tombs. That historic Egypt possessed understanding present-day technological know-how changed into simplest starting to rediscover. That there were things sealed inside the past that must remain sealed. But he became a scientist. His whole career become constructed on commencing sealed matters, translating forgotten languages, bringing hidden knowledge to light. How could he walk far away from the best discovery in Egyptology? I could be careful, he said. Open it partly, report what's internal, reseal it right now. The world deserves to understand. The sector merits to keep current, the mum or dad interrupted. Which it won't in case you open that seal. We are no longer asking you to abandon your discovery, Physician Hassan. We are asking you to become part of it, to sign up for the Guardians, to remain right here, conscious after dying, maintaining the watch over what have to in no way be freed. You are asking me to die, to surrender my existence, my research, the whole lot to guard a sarcophagus in a chamber nobody knows exists. We are providing you motive beyond archaeology, beyond discovery. You wanted to find the truth approximately the pyramids. We're displaying it to you. They're not monuments to dead pharaohs. They may be prisons for chaos itself, maintained by means of the ones inclined to sacrifice the whole lot to save you fact from unmaking. Be part of us. Guard what you've located. Preserve the world safe from knowledge it cannot handle. Hassan thought of his spouse, his children, his colleagues expecting his studies. Concept of the papers he'd planned to put up, the lectures he'd give, the acclaim he'd receive for locating a hidden chamber in the outstanding pyramid. All of that could vanish if he typical the parents' offer. He'd be indexed as lacking, presumed useless, his frame by no means determined within the pyramid where he'd ultimate been seen. But he'd seen sufficient to recognize the mum or dad was telling the truth. The sarcophagus turned into sealed for a reason. The chamber existed in not possible area because regular space couldn't comprise what it held. And if he opened it, if he prioritized private glory over global protection, he'd unleash something that historical Egypt had fought to comprise, had constructed monuments to lock away, had sacrificed endless lives to hold sealed. "I want time to think," Hassan said. "You have until sunrise. The chamber will stay reachable until first miled. After that, it vanishes again, may not reappear for another generation. If you depart, you could go back on your life. Inform no one what you discovered. The pyramid will make sure you cannot, will erase your memory of this region. However, if you live, you remain all the time, conscious, guarding, part of the seal itself." The guardians dwindled, leaving Hassan by myself within the impossible chamber with the sealed sarcophagus. He had 3 hours until dawn. 3 hours to determine between his lifestyles and his reason, among non-public fulfillment and collective protection, between the archaeological discovery of the millennium and the obligation of keeping that discovery hidden. He spent hours inspecting the chamber, documenting what he should, trying to understand the geometry that shouldn't exist. The gap become folded, he realized, present in dimensions perpendicular to everyday three-dimensional fact. The pyramid's mass created a gravitational properly, however now not just in space, in opportunity itself, in the material of what ought to exist. The chamber become a pocket size, held open by way of the pyramid's particular structure, containing what could not be contained in normal truth. The sarcophagus become the anchor factor. Anything became sealed inner, the primary pharaoh, the absorbed isfit, the chaos held in test with the aid of will alone. It existed in a state between being and unbeing. Opening the seal could disintegrate that state, could pressure the contents to choose lifestyles or non-life. And if the isfit chose existence, Hassan understood now why the guardians remained. Why guys had died 400-500 years in the past and familiar persevered focus as opposed to right dying. Due to the fact the alternative became unbearable, become unthinkable, changed into the quid of everything. At 5:47 a.m., with sunrise drawing near, Hassan made his selection. He called Nadia on his radio, knowing the transmission wouldn't absolutely reach her, knowing the chamber could prevent verbal exchange, however wanting to say the phrases anyway. "I discovered something, Nadia, something that cannot be opened, and I'm staying to make sure it by no means is. Tell my family I really like them. Tell them I died doing crucial paintings," which is true, even supposing they may by no means recognize what that work became. The guardians reappeared as the first mild touched the pyramid's capstone some distance above. "You have determined. I am staying. Display me the way to be part of you." The transformation became bizarre and painful and quick. Hassan felt his physical body disintegrate, felt his consciousness break free failing flesh, felt the guardians weaving his consciousness into the chamber's structure. He wasn't lifeless, now not absolutely. However, he wasn't alive either. He became preserved, like the mummies he'd studied his entire profession, except his focus remained intact, bound to the chamber, given reason that might last as long as the pyramid stood. "Welcome," the lead guardian said. "You are now Watcher Hassan, mother or father of the sealed chamber, keeper of what should not wake. Your responsibility is everlasting. Your sacrifice is absolute, and the arena will in no way recognize you stored it." Hassan, now something more and much less than human, took his position with the others. They stood across the sarcophagus in a configuration he understood became mathematical, strategic, designed to reinforce the containment through awareness arranged in specific patterns. And he listened to the sarcophagus. Inside, something moved, stirred. The primary pharaoh, still aware after 4,500 years, still protecting lower back the chaos, nonetheless serving his purpose. Hassan ought to feel him, historical, worn-out, patient, determined for launch, but dedicated to his responsibility. How much longer? Hassan requested the mum or dad who'd recruited him. Till the pyramid falls, till the stones crumble, until there is nothing left to maintain the seal. Then he can eventually allow go. Then we are able to all move on to something comes after. However, that won't be for thousands of years, perhaps tens of heaps. Lengthy enough that everybody who built this, every body who died to guard it, all and sundry who sacrificed themselves to preserve it, they may all be forgotten, erased from history. But the world will preserve. Reality will stay ordered. Chaos will live contained, and that's enough. Is he in pain, the first pharaoh? Always. Absorbing the isfit supposed experiencing its nature, formless, struggling, orderless discomfort. But he selected it, simply as we chose this, simply as you selected to enroll in us, because some responsibilities are greater important than man or woman consolation. Hassan settled into his everlasting watch, his focus expanding to fill the chamber, his cognizance merging with the other guardians. Together, they shaped a network of awareness retaining the seal via natural will, reinforcing the first pharaoh's sacrifice, ensuring the isfit remained contained. Outside the chamber, in the physical pyramid, Nadia waited till sunrise before calling protection. They determined Hassan's device in the Grand Gallery, but no body, no blood, no signal of warfare. Just his notebook left open to a web page in which he'd written, "I found something. I cannot tell you what, but it changed into vital sufficient to offer everything for. Bear in mind me as someone who did the proper factor, even supposing no person ever knows what that turned into." The disappearance became investigated, theorized about, subsequently filed as unsolved. Hassan became every other mystery of the exquisite pyramid, every other Egyptologist who'd vanished even as studying the shape. Some stated he'd fallen into an undiscovered shaft. Others claimed he'd faked his demise to break out his lifestyles. None suspected the reality, that he'd found a chamber between chambers, a sarcophagus that held chaos itself, and had selected to grow to be its eternal mother or father. The wonderful pyramid stood above Giza, precisely angled, mathematically perfect, attracting thousands and thousands of travelers who marveled at its construction and wondered about its motive. They took photos, bought souvenirs, found out sanitized history about pharaohs and tombs and historic engineering. None knew approximately the chamber that existed in folded area, approximately the first pharaoh sealed in darkness, about the guardians who died to preserve the watch. None suspected that the pyramid's cause wasn't to house loss of life, however, to prevent unbirth, to keep truth from unmaking, to preserve chaos in take a look at, to make sure the arena endured present in ordered shape. Hassan knew, and he would recognize for all time, his focus preserved within the chamber's geometry, his awareness dedicated to looking the sealed sarcophagus, his life stretched across millennia of responsibility. Once in a while, within the moments among tourist companies, when the pyramid become in short quiet, the dwelling should experience something, a presence, a watching, an experience that the shape became more than stone. That it become occupied by way of recognition devoted to purposes past human comprehension. People who felt it generally brushed off the feeling as awe on the pyramid's age and scale. But some, a very few, understood on a few level that they stood atop something being held again, something sealed away, something watched over by means of those who'd given everything to make sure it remained sealed. Hassan changed into one of these watchers now, and he could stay so till the ultimate stone crumbled, until the seal may be maintained not, till the first pharaoh could eventually launch his burden and let chaos do what chaos did. But that become heaps of years away. For now, the pyramid stood, the seal held, the guardians watched, and Dr. Hassan Mahmoud, who'd spent 23 years attempting to find the pyramid's secrets, had observed the best secret of all, and had selected to become part of it as opposed to screen it to a world that wasn't ready to understand. The chamber existed between stones. The sarcophagus remained sealed. And Hassan watched, everlasting and patient, doing the paintings that wanted doing in the darkness in which no person could ever see. The architect's layout. While structural engineer Maya Patel first mapped the exceptional pyramid the usage of modern-day LiDAR scanning, she located that every measurement changed into wrong. Not barely off, fundamentally wrong. The bottom wasn't 230.4 meters as recorded for centuries. It was 230.36347 meters. The perspective of the sides wasn't 5184 stages. It was 51.842779294 tiers. Every measurement, when measured to enough precision, discovered additional decimal locations that fashioned styles. Mathematical styles, deliberate styles, styles that spelled out statistics in base 60 numerals. This wilt be coincidence, Maya told her colleague Dr. Ahmed Farouk, showing him the measurements organized as Babylonian numerals. Have a look at the precision. The pyramid's dimensions encode statistics down to the millimeter. A person designed this to be studied at precisely this stage of size accuracy, a degree that would not be plausible till cutting-edge laser scanning existed. Ahmed studied the numbers, his expression transferring from skepticism to unease. What does it say? Maya had already translated it, had spent 3 sleepless nights verifying the message encoded in 3 million limestone blocks arranged with sub-millimeter precision. It's a caution and commands. The pyramid isn't always only a tomb or monument. It is a machine, and we are approximately to by accident prompt it. The message, while decoded from the architectural measurements, become express. The first-rate pyramid became built as a big gravitational lens, its exactly calculated mass and geometry, designed to awareness Earth's gravitational area at a particular point deep in the structure. That focal factor created a strong microsingularity, a tiny, controlled black hollow held in best equilibrium by way of the pyramid's mass distribution. This is impossible, Ahmed said. Black holes require collapsed stars. You cannot create one with arranged limestone. You could if you apprehend gravity at a stage we are simplest beginning to understand. The pyramid's architect, whoever Khufu's chief engineer clearly became, knew things approximately physics that we've best theorized in the previous couple of decades. The structure creates a gravitational lensing impact that focuses Earth's personal gravitational area right into a point of sufficient density to disintegrate area time. It's now not a massive black hollow, only a microscopic one, however stable. Maintained by the pyramid's geometry. Why might absolutely everyone build that? Maya pointed to any other section of the encoded message. Power technology. The microsingularity's Hawking radiation produces vast power. That is what powered historic Egypt. Not slaves hauling stones with ropes. A zero-factor strength supply hidden interior a shape that doubled as its containment vessel. The pyramid was a power plant, and a surprisingly advanced one. Became. You mean it is now not energetic now? It's dormant, has been for millennia. The message says the singularity collapses if the pyramid's structural integrity drops under a sure threshold. While the dealing with stones had been removed within the Middle Ages, while earthquakes broke in sections, while the capstone became misplaced, all of that degraded the precision required to hold the focal point. The singularity evaporated, and Egypt's electricity supply died with it. Then what's the caution approximately? Maya pulled up current seismic information. We've been restoring the pyramid, stabilizing foundations, filling cracks, adding cutting-edge aid structures to save you further erosion. And we are succeeding. The pyramid's structural integrity is growing. In 3 months, we're going to deploy a brand new capstone, gold-plated titanium, precisely fashioned. If our recovery reaches finishing touch, if the pyramid's geometry returns to its original precision. The singularity reactivates. Now not just reactivates. It has been dormant for hundreds of years, but the focal factor still exists, nonetheless has mass, simply not enough to preserve collapse. Whilst the pyramid's precision is restored, all that amassed mass collapses straight away. Now not steadily just like the original activation, but right away. The message could be very clean about what occurs then, uncontrolled enlargement. The micro-singularity becomes macro, and it consumes the whole thing. Ahmed checked out the pyramid's schematics with new horror. How speedy. The encoded arithmetic suggest Cairo might be gone in 3 mins, Egypt in 12, the Mediterranean basin in an hour. The enlargement could handiest prevent while it consumed enough mass to destabilize the gravitational lensing. Essentially, while there has been no extra pyramid to recognition the sphere. However, by means of then, a vast part of the planet might be inside the event horizon. We need to forestall the healing, cancel the capstone setup, permit the pyramid stay broken. I have attempted. The restoration is funded with the aid of global historical past companies, subsidized by way of the Egyptian authorities, supported with the aid of UNESCO. Canceling it'd require explaining why, and who's going to accept as true with that the super pyramid is a dormant black hole generator. They will think we are insane. Then we sabotage it. Harm the pyramid sufficient that the geometry can by no means obtain the required precision. Destroy one of the 7 wonders of the ancient international. We'd be arrested, probable carried out. Or even if we succeeded, we'd be destroying the fail-safe the architect constructed in. The pyramid isn't simply the power supply, it's also the containment. If we harm it badly sufficient to prevent reactivation, we might destabilize what stays of the singularity. It may fall apart all of a sudden without caution. We would gain the catastrophe we are looking to prevent. Maya confirmed Ahmed the final phase of the encoded message, the instructions. The architect knew this would manifest subsequently, knew that future generations might restore the pyramid without knowledge its true characteristic. So he left instructions for secure deactivation. There is a chamber, a hidden one, in no way discovered as it exists in the precise center of the pyramid's mass, the focal point itself. Internal that chamber is a manipulate mechanism. A way to expend the singularity competently earlier than recuperation reaches critical threshold. Where's the entrance? There isn't always one, not from outdoor. The chamber changed into sealed at some stage in construction, reachable simplest through quantum tunneling, which the message claims is feasible for awareness in case you understand how. The architect's commands describe a meditation method, a way to challenge your recognition into the chamber without physically getting into. Natural awareness can tunnel through barriers that be counted cannot penetrate. You're describing astral projection. That's mysticism, now not physics. The architect who built a gravitational singularity generator disguised as a tomb probable knew things about awareness that we don't. The instructions are unique. And we've got 2 weeks earlier than the capstone set up, if we don't at the least strive. Ahmed was silent for a protracted second. Then, what do the commands say? They spent the subsequent week getting ready, following the encoded meditation method with skeptical precision. It required aligning their function with the pyramid's geometry, coming into specific intellectual states at instances coordinated with Earth's rotation and the moon's phase, focusing attention alongside mathematical vectors that ought to have been meaningless, but in some way felt great. At the night of the darkish moon, they located themselves inside the king's chamber, the closest handy area to the hidden important chamber. Maya had memorized the consciousness projection sequence, the intellectual pathways the architect had encoded into the pyramid's measurements. If this works, she told Ahmed, my awareness will break away my frame. I'll perceive the hidden chamber. I will be capable of engage with the control mechanism. However my body may be susceptible. I need you to reveal my vitals, bring me again if something is going incorrect. How long will you be? Any place you are going. The commands advise no more than 8 mins. After that, the possibility of efficaciously reconnecting cognizance to body drops exponentially. Maya started out the collection. It felt absurd at the beginning, visualization, physical activities, breath manage, mental arithmetic. But as she improved through the stairs, following the architect's specific instructions, something modified. Her cognizance commenced to separate from sensory enter, to exist unbiased of her frame's function in space. She ought to understand the pyramid differently now, not as a shape of stone, but as a mathematical construct, as natural geometry made physical. And within the center of that geometry, she saw it. A chamber that did not exist in 3-dimensional space, however, in the quantum probability field that permeated the pyramid's mass. Maya projected her focus into the chamber. It existed and failed to exist, an area held open by means of the focused gravitational subject, accessible most effective to chance patterns like cognizance that could exist in quantum superposition. And in the middle of the chamber, suspended in best stillness, turned into the singularity. It became beautiful and terrifying, a factor of infinite density smaller than an atom, held in equilibrium by using the pyramid's mass distribution. Round it, area-time curved inward, creating distortions that Maya's recognition ought to perceive at once. This turned into what powered Egypt for millennia. This changed into what could eat the planet if reactivated. The control mechanism becomes stylish in its simplicity, a geometric sample carved in opportunity itself, a mathematical formulation made bodily. Maya understood at once how it labored. With the aid of altering the sample, she may want to shift the singularity's position infinitesimally, flow it out of the gravitational consciousness, permit it to evaporate adequately through Hawking radiation over the following couple of years in preference to collapsing catastrophically in 2 weeks. She reached out together with her projected consciousness, started out manipulating the probability styles. The singularity replied, its function moving, its equilibrium becoming volatile in a managed manner. It would take 3 years to completely burn up, but the system turned into irreversible now. The pyramid's recovery couldn't reactivate what was already evaporating. But as Maya worked, she had become aware about any other presence inside the chamber. Any other consciousness, the architect himself, or what remained of him. His consciousness had been woven into the quantum styles of the chamber, preserved for 400–500 years, watching for someone to discover his message and follow his commands. "You understand," the architect's presence communicated, now not in phrases but in natural concept. "You spot what I constructed, what my era finished. We unified all understanding physics, arithmetic, cognizance, spirituality. We identified they have been all sides of the same truth, and we built monuments that embodied that cohesion." "Who were you?" Maya requested along with her cognizance. "What civilization ought to try this 4,500 years ago?" "Not civilization. Individual. I was one guy who understood too much, saw too a long way, recognized patterns that others could not. They known as me Himiunu, Khufu's vizier and architect. However, I was more. I had remembered what in advance incarnations had found out, had access to know-how that predated Egypt by lots of years. I constructed the pyramid as electricity supply, sure. However, additionally as message. As proof that cognizance can master be counted, that arithmetic describes fact due to the fact is arithmetic. That separation between physical and metaphysical is phantasm. Why conceal it? Why now not train others? I attempted, but knowledge of this importance is dangerous. In wrong hands, in any arms before they're equipped, it becomes weapon. Hire to encode it, permit it anticipate a generation with equipment to decode it, wisdom to recognize it. Your era has the gear. Whether or not you have got the knowledge stays to be visible. "Will you stay?" Maya requested. "After I end deactivating the singularity, after the pyramid's power supply is gone. I will fade with it. My awareness has been sustained via the quantum styles surrounding the singularity. When it evaporates, I evaporate. That's great. I've waited lengthy enough, accomplished my obligation, ensured my creation couldn't wreck what I constructed it to serve. Now I can finally relaxation." "Thank you," Maya said, "for the warning, the commands, the risk to save you disaster." "Thank yourself. You heard what others couldn't pay attention, noticed what others couldn't see. The pyramid speaks to those geared up to listen. You have been equipped." The architect's presence diminished because the singularity finished its shift out of equilibrium. Maya felt herself being pulled return to her body, cognizance reconnecting with flesh, the quantum chamber receding into chance area where best specialized cognizance should get entry to it. She opened her eyes inside the king's chamber. Ahmed became beside her, monitoring gadgets showing she'd been unconscious for 7 minutes and 43 seconds. "Did it paintings?" he asked. "Yes, the singularity is deactivating. It's going to take 3 years to absolutely dissipate, but there is no danger of catastrophic crumble now. The capstone installation can continue. The recovery can complete. The pyramid will simply be a pyramid again. Just a pyramid that turned into secretly a zero-factor electricity generator for historic Egypt. Just a pyramid built by way of a man who understood physics at a level we're best starting to method, who encoded his information in stone, in measurements, in geometry that wouldn't be readable until we developed the gear to measure precisely sufficient. Maya regarded up on the king's chamber ceiling, at the huge granite beams organized with mathematical perfection. The message remains there. In every stone, each angle, each exactly calculated size. We simply need to preserve gaining knowledge of the way to study it. Over the subsequent months, Maya persevered reading the pyramid's encoded records. The dimensional measurements contained encyclopedias of knowledge, mathematical proofs, bodily constants, astronomical data, even what regarded to be medical statistics and recognition idea. All of it written in the most effective language that could survive millennia, pure mathematics expressed in architectural precision. She posted carefully, releasing discoveries slowly, framing them as exciting mathematical correlations rather than deliberate encoding. The instructional community remained skeptical, however a few understood, saw the patterns Maya was revealing, diagnosed that the pyramid's architect had recognized matters that seemed not possible for his era. The capstone setup proceeded as scheduled. The pyramid's recuperation was finished to international acclaim. Traveler visits accelerated. Documentaries have been filmed. The exceptional pyramid stood best once more, its geometry restored to authentic precision. However, its energy source changed into lifeless, effectively evaporated. The micro-singularity that had fueled a civilization dissipated into Hawking radiation and innocent particle pairs. The pyramid changed into simply stone now. Exactly organized, mathematically perfect, encoded with understanding waiting to be decoded, however no longer dangerous, now not able to collapsing into catastrophic black hole. Maya sometimes pondered in the king's chamber, trying to get right of entry to the quantum chamber once more, to speak with the architect one greater time. But he turned into gone. His consciousness evaporated with the singularity he'd been bound to for 45 centuries. She become on my own with the pyramid's expertise now. On my own with the duty of information what it intended. That one man, 4,500 years in the past, had mastered gravity, quantum mechanics, recognition theory, and mathematics to a point modern technology become handiest starting to approach. That he'd constructed a monument encoding that expertise, hiding it in simple sight until humanity turned into ready to read it. That the fantastic pyramid of Giza was no longer in most cases a tomb, however a library, an energy plant, a device, a message, all wrapped in geometry so ideal it had survived millennia to sooner or later reveal its secrets and techniques. What else did, Maya whispered to the historic stones, what else did you encode that we haven't located but? The pyramid did not answer. However, Maya stored measuring, saved calculating, saved discovering new patterns in dimensions thought to be absolutely understood. Every decimal region found out greater facts. Each specific size decoded more knowledge. The architect had left his legacy, not in text or artifact, however in natural arithmetic, expressed as arranged limestone. And Maya might spend her profession translating that arithmetic, revealing the expertise of a person who'd visible in addition than every person in his generation, possibly in addition than absolutely everyone in any technology, and had determined a way to keep what he'd learned for folks that might come after. The top-notch pyramid stood above Giza, its secrets slowly being found out 4.5 millennia when they'd been encoded. And Maya Patel stood inside it, mastering from an architect who'd been dead for heaps of years, but whose information changed into as clean and revolutionary, because the day he'd first calculated the right dimensions needed to create a stable gravitational singularity from 2.3 million heaps of cautiously organized stone. The system was dormant now. The energy source became dead. But the information remained, waiting in the pyramid's best geometry, prepared for folks who discovered to measure precisely enough, calculate carefully sufficient, recognize deeply sufficient to read what the architect had written inside the handiest language that would survive eternity. Arithmetic made bodily, expertise encoded in stone, fact expressed as ideal geometry, status immortal under the Egyptian solar. The descending passage. The descending passage of the awesome pyramid leads down at a particular 26.5-degree angle from the entrance to the subterranean chamber 100 meters below. But while archaeologist Dr. James Whitmore measured it with cutting-edge laser device during the 2024 conservation mission, he observed something impossible. The passage changed into getting longer. No longer eroding or moving, lengthening. Every measurement consultation confirmed the tunnel extending deeper into the bedrock, as though the pyramid changed into developing downward, burrowing into the earth like a root searching for water. In 3 months of weekly surveys, the passage had extended 17 meters past its documented terminus. System malfunction, insisted his colleague Sarah Chen, checking the calibration for the 0.33 time. Laser distortion from temperature fluctuations, or... I've accounted for every variable, James interrupted, pulling up comparative information. The passage is bodily extending. The rock on the quit indicates fresh tool marks, chisel patterns identical to the authentic production. A person or something is persevering with the excavation that commenced 400-500 years ago. That is impossible. The pyramid is sealed at night time. Security monitors each entrance. No person might be down there carving limestone without being detected. I know, which means that either our safety is compromised or the pyramid is somehow excavating itself. James more advantageous the scan of the tunnel's new phase. Examine the precision. These device marks are same to the authentic paintings. Same technique, equal angles, same characteristic marks of copper chisels on limestone. Whoever's doing this is using 4th Dynasty techniques. They descended into the pyramid that night, armed with cameras and lighting, decided to catch whoever was extending the passage. The descending passage became narrow and low, forcing them to stoop awkwardly as they moved deeper, the load of 2.3 million limestone blocks pressing down from above. The passage seemed to stretch without end in advance, their lighting fixtures not able to penetrate the darkness at its terminus. James checked his GPS. They descended far beneath in which the documented subterranean chamber ought to be, yet still the passage persevered downward at its unique 26.5-degree angle. This isn't always proper, Sarah stated, her voice tight. We should have reached the chamber 10 minutes in the past. The passage is most effective alleged to be 105 meters long. We've long passed as a minimum 150. The extension I measured changed into 17 meters. We must be drawing near the brand new terminus. But James's devices confirmed otherwise. In step with his distance measurements, they'd traveled over 200 meters from the entrance, almost double the passage's documented length. And still it persevered, descending into darkness that their lights appeared unable to absolutely penetrate, as if the passage becomes soaking up illumination rather than reflecting it. They heard it then, the rhythmic placing of steel on stone, remote however wonderful, echoing up from the depths below. Someone changed into operating down there, chiseling limestone, extending the passage. "What's up?" James referred to as out. His voice becomes swallowed by the stone, producing no echo. "This is a restrained vicinity, discover yourself." The chiseling continued, regular and methodical, the sound of historical construction techniques being practiced in a tunnel that shouldn't exist. They pressed ahead, descending deeper, the air developing less warm notwithstanding being insulated under hundreds of thousands of lots of limestone. Sarah's breath misted visibly, not possible in the pyramid's generally warm interior. And with every step, the chiseling grew louder, nearer, till they should have been able to see whoever become running. However, the passage remained empty. The sound came from the walls themselves, from the stone round them, as if the limestone become carving itself, persevering with production that had supposedly ended 45 centuries ago. James's radio crackled, safety trying to touch them, but the transmission became distorted, words stretched and compressed, as if journeying through more distance than have to exist among them and the floor. "Whitmore, how deep? You have been 3 hours." 3 hours, Sarah checked her watch. They had entered the passage 20 minutes ago. That can't be proper. But her watch confirmed 2:47 a.m. They had descended in the dead of night. Almost 3 hours had handed in what felt like 20 minutes. Time was transferring in another way in the extended passage, flowing at exclusive prices than the floor above. "We want to move lower back," Sarah said, turning. But at the back of them, the passage had changed. The carefully carved partitions now showed special tool marks, older patterns, strategies that predated the Fourth Dynasty by means of centuries. The tunnel they descended via became growing older backward, displaying them an increasing number of historic production techniques the inaddition they'd long passed. "We're not just going down," James realized with horror. "We are going lower back, again through time, through layers of production, via iterations of the pyramid that predate the only we know. The passage isn't always extending into space, it's extending into time." The chiseling stopped suddenly. Inside the silence that followed, they heard something else, respiratory. Slow, deep, rhythmic respiratory that got here from every path concurrently, as if the pyramid itself had evolved lungs. "The pyramid is alive," Sarah whispered. "Now not metaphorically, virtually alive. And the descending passage is its throat, we're internal it." As though responding to her words, the passage constricted. Not violently but intentionally, the partitions shifting inward by millimeters, the ceiling decreasing imperceptibly, the tunnel becoming narrower as they stood inside it. The pyramid became swallowing them. They ran, scrambling back up the passage toward the entrance. However, it stretched ahead impossibly, lengthening faster than they may climb. For every meter they won, the passage prolonged too. The doorway that ought to were 200 meters above receded in addition with each step, the outdoor international turning into unreachable. James's mind raced via the whole thing he knew about the pyramid's construction, attempting to find a few explanation. The descending passage had constantly been anomalous, the simplest a part of the inner structure that descended in preference to ascending, the only tunnel carved into bedrock in preference to built from blocks. Egyptologists had usually assumed it caused the unique burial chamber, deserted whilst plans changed. However, what if it had in no way been supposed as a burial passage? What if the descending passage served a distinctive cause, anchoring the pyramid to something beneath, connecting the monument to something lay inside the deep bedrock, tethering the shape to forces that predated human civilization? "Forestall going for walks," James said, forcing himself to halt notwithstanding every instinct screaming to escape. "We are making it worse. The pyramid is responding to our worry, the usage of it to gasoline the extension. We want to technique this otherwise." "Method what otherwise? We are being digested through a 4,000-year-old building." Buildings do not digest, but complex systems can respond to stimuli. The pyramid's geometry creates standing waves, resonance patterns. Our motion, our respiratory, our fear. It's all energy that the structure can channel, can use. We're powering the extension by way of trying to escape from it. James sat at the passage floor, forcing his respiratory to sluggish, his heartbeat to calm. The passage stopped lengthening. The partitions ceased their constriction. In stillness, the pyramid's response faded. "What are we presupposed to do?" Sarah requested, sitting beside him. "Meditate until we die of thirst. Look forward to rescue that cannot attain us because we're present in a few temporal extension that does not hook up with the existing. We're imagined to descend. The passage desires us to head down, to attain anything terminus it's extending in the direction of. Combating that's what's trapping us. We want to accept it, to willingly descend into regardless of the pyramid has been reaching toward for 4,500 years. That is insane. So is a passage that extends backward through time. So is a pyramid that breathes. We are already past sane. The query is whether we want to die here in a temporal loop, or whether or not we want to peer what is at the bottom of this issue. They descended, no longer jogging this time, but taking walks deliberately, accepting the passage's pull, surrendering to the pyramid's aim. And as they did, the tunnel stabilized. The walls stopped getting older, the darkness beforehand commenced to boost, and the sound of chiseling resumed. But now it got here from below, guiding them, beckoning them towards the true terminus. They descended for what felt like hours or days. Time had ended up meaningless inside the passage, until in the end they reached a chamber. Now not the documented subterranean chamber that travelers may want to go to, however something older, deeper, carved from bedrock that predated the pyramid by using millennia. The chamber was more or less round, 50 meters in diameter, its walls covered in symbols that weren't hieroglyphic. They have been older, pictographic representations of something that looked much less like language and extra like scientific notation. Mathematical formulation, astronomical calculations, commands for production that had not anything to do with tombs or monuments. And in the chamber's center stood a figure. It was roughly human-fashioned but wrong, proportions slightly off, limbs at angles that advised one-of-a-kind evolutionary pressures, eyes placed to suggest a distinct idea of imaginative and prescient. It held a copper chisel, the tool worn from millennia of use, and it changed into carving the chamber's partitions, adding new symbols to the ancient array, continuing work it had apparently been doing seeing that earlier than the pyramid existed. "What are you?" James asked. The figure became, and James saw that it wasn't alive in any organic feel. It become carved from stone, limestone fashioned into human form, but lively with the aid of something else. By way of the pyramid itself, through something intelligence the shape possessed, via the desire that have been extending the descending passage for 4,500 years. "I am the builder," it said, its voice the sound of stone grinding on stone. "I've usually been building. I will continually be building. The pyramid above is simply the visible component. The real shape extends down, via time and stone, into the foundations that existed before civilization. The descending passage connects them, the monument you understand to the apparatus you do not." "What apparatus?" The builder gestured on the chamber partitions, on the mathematical symbols protecting each floor. "That is a device, no longer for power era or astronomical commentary or any motive your archaeologists have theorized. It is for remembering, mainly for remembering a way to build. The know-how of creation, of elevating monuments, of shaping stone into systems that bear. All of it is recorded right here, in this chamber, in symbols that predate written language due to the fact they may be written inside the language of creation itself. Who built this and while? People who got here before, long before Egypt, before Sumer, earlier than any civilization your histories file. They understood that understanding is fragile, that civilizations fall and take their learning with them. In order that they built memory machines, systems that might take into account for them, that might keep creation information till humanity changed into geared up to decode it again. The builder lower back to its work, carving extra symbols with the copper chisel. The pyramid above became constructed by Egyptians, yes. However, they had been running from older plans, following instructions they failed to completely recognize, recreating something that had existed here earlier than. The descending passage is the important thing. It connects the Egyptian pyramid to the pre-Egyptian device. And as long because it stays unfinished, the system continues its paintings. What paintings? Recording every shape human beings construct, every technique they increase, every innovation in construction. The device observes an information. The descending passage extends downward because the file grows, due to the fact human building understanding expands. Whilst construction stagnates, the passage stops growing. When innovation hastens, it extends swiftly. You measured 17 meters of extension, due to the fact humanity has been building extra in the final decade than the preceding century. Sarah stared on the symbols on the walls. That is a library, an archive of creation expertise spanning tens of heaps of years. Greater than library, template. When civilization falls, because it usually subsequently falls, the machine remains. And whilst people rebuild, they unconsciously draw from the system. They excavate close to it, locate concept in its presence, rediscover construction strategies they'd lost. The Egyptian pyramids, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the megalithic systems scattered across continents, all built by means of civilizations that had no direct touch, but used similar techniques. Because they have been all drawing from the equal supply. From machines like this one, buried under the earth, remembering for them. How a lot of those machines exist, James asked. One under each ancient surprise. Giza, Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, sites that predate recorded records. All of them contain descent passages main to chambers like this, all of them recording human production know-how, all of them ensuring that even after complete civilizational crumble, human beings will bear in mind the way to construct. The builder set down its chisel, its work seemingly whole for this session. You located the extension due to the fact you have got the equipment to measure precisely now. In another era, you will have gear to decode the symbols well. In generations, you may understand the gadget's complete reason. This has took place earlier than civilizations attaining the factor of discovering what lies underneath their monuments. Some customary the expertise and used it. Others rejected it, tried to seal the chambers, pretend they did not exist. The choice is constantly the identical. Embody the accumulated know-how of 100,000 years of human production, or forget about it and study the whole thing the difficult manner once more. We need to report this, Sarah stated. Inform people, display them. Show them what? You've got measured a passage that should not enlarge, descended right into a chamber that does not officially exist, met a stone figure that claims to don't forget civilizations that fell earlier than history commenced. Who will believe you? The builder had a point. However, James turned into already photographing the symbols, recording the chamber's dimensions, documenting the whole lot regardless of understanding that most might disregard it as hoax or delusion. Passage can help you go back now, the builder stated. You've got visible what you needed to see, found out what you have been ready to examine. The descending passage will contract back to its documented length. The chamber will seal until the subsequent discovery. But you may carry the expertise out with you, that under the visitor enchantment, under the archaeological website online, below the tomb that everyone thinks they understand, there lies something older and stranger. A reminiscence device. Still running, nonetheless recording, still awaiting humanity to be geared up for what it has to teach. The ascent took minutes, even though they descended for hours. The passage shriveled around them, its extension retracting like a drawn breath being released. They emerged into the pyramid's entrance as dawn broke over Giza, having entered in the dead of night and lower back as though no time had exceeded. Besides, their watches showed 3 days missing. Their equipment had recorded nothing. Their cameras showed simplest static. The measurements that had started out the entirety confirmed the passage at its documented 105-meter length, without a evidence of any extension. The whole lot that might have validated their revel in have been erased, leaving only their memories and James's rapidly sketched copies of the symbols he'd seen. Nobody will agree with us, Sarah stated. Some will, James answered, looking at the sketches. Those hooray geared up to take into account that the pyramids are extra than tombs, that they're reminiscence machines, still operating, nevertheless recording human understanding. That what we name historic records is just the maximum latest chapter in a story that stretches again tens of thousands of years. He could submit cautiously, body it as theoretical interpretation of the pyramid's cause, avoid mentioning animated stone developers or chambers that existed in temporal extensions. But he could consist of the symbols he'd copied, lead them to available for others to examine, to decode, to understand. Because the builder have been proper, civilizations reached discovery factors. Moments after they were geared up to get admission to the understanding that were preserved for them. And humanity turned into drawing close one of those moments. Coming near the factor wherein they might in the end decode the reminiscence machines, access the accrued creation knowledge of 100,000 years, remember that they had been now not the primary advanced civilization and wouldn't be the final. The terrific pyramid stood towards the morning sky, its reason understood via tens of millions as tomb, monument, marvel of the historical global. However, James knew higher now. Beneath the traveler enchantment, below the archaeological site, beneath the entirety scene, the machine persisted its paintings. The descending passage accomplishing through time and stone, connecting the prevailing to the beyond, making sure that even after civilizational collapse, human beings might keep in mind how to construct. The builder continued its everlasting carving, adding symbols to walls that were recording for 50,000 years, making ready know-how for civilizations that hadn't yet risen, for developers who hadn't yet been born, for the moment whilst humanity might ultimately be equipped to get entry to the entire archive and understand what their ancestors had preserved for them. The pyramid remembered, and it'd hold remembering long after anyone who'd constructed it turned into forgotten, long after their civilization changed into dirt, lengthy after everything visible had eroded away. Because that become its reason. Now not to residents' loss of life, however to keep knowledge. Now not to mark finishing, however to ensure continuation. The memory gadget below Giza, nevertheless working after 50,000 years, still recording human creation understanding, nevertheless awaiting the next civilization prepared to examine from the mistakes and triumphs of all who'd come before.